And welcome back. Now, worrying concerns have been raised about the continued criticism and public attacks directed at the conduct of the judiciary in especially its judgment involving high-profile persons or political parties. Now, the latest attack came after the Constitutional Court's scathing judgment against former President Jacob Zuma, which has been labelled by the Jacob Zuma Foundation as constitutionally flawed and a depiction of a very angry panel of judges. Now, during his media briefing on Sunday, the former president also said that there was something wrong with the country's judicial system. The court found that the former president was in contempt of court and sentenced him to an unsuspended 15 months in prison. But how much legal merit do the continued attacks on judges have? And could the judges be making a political statement of exemplary punishment with some of the rulings that we've seen? So to give us some more perspective, we're joined by Mbekezeli Benjamin, researcher and Advocacy Officer at Judges Matter. Mbekezeli, good morning. Thanks so much for being with us.
Good morning, Sakina, and good morning to the viewers at home.
Let's start at the beginning. How would you describe, or what would you say constitutes an attack on judges or the judiciary?
Well, an attack on the judiciary is one in which you criticize a judge, or particular judge, or the judiciary as an institution based on nothing, where you don't have facts, where you have not taken the time to read a judgment, or where you simply are reacting to maybe a political or an issue that you care about, and you react quite strongly. There, it goes from being legitimate criticism to an attack on the judiciary, which legitimate criticism is fine. We all criticize judges, but attacks on the judiciary are no-no.
So let's speak to examples. What, in your view, in terms of practical examples that we've seen play out, would be legitimate criticism? And what, in your view, would you post as an example of something that was unwarranted and constitutes an attack on the judiciary?
Sure. So personally, and most lawyers, when they read judgments, they read them in a certain way. You can agree with the judgment, or you can disagree with the judgment. And when you disagree, you say reasons for your disagreement. There have been many cases where I personally have criticized the Constitutional Court in particular, where, for example, there was a case that involved, it's called the Mazibuko case, that involved water meters in Johannesburg. There, the court, I think, was incorrect to say that people will not suffer by the introduction of prepaid water meters. So I think that judgment of the Constitutional Court was wrong in terms of the things that they considered, but I respect the judgment. And so that, for me, is criticism of a judgment. And then if we take, for example, this latest judgment that came out of the Constitutional Court, to describe it as angry, as emotional, and to particularly isolate Justice Gampepe from the majority of the judges in that judgment, that is an attack on the judiciary, because you'll never hear a judgment by a male judge be described as being emotional or angry, but it's only when it's women judges is it called emotional or angry. And so that kind of thing is an attack on the judiciary, and it's not fair or legitimate criticism.
So when we look at attacks on judges or the judiciary, how influential are these, and what sort of impact is it likely to have not only on the public's confidence in the judiciary, but also on the judges themselves in executing their duties?
I think the attacks on the judiciary do some damage. They damage the reputation of the judiciary. They damage the esteem of the judiciary, because unlike most institutions, the judiciary only relies on its reputation and on its integrity. So the reason why we all subject ourselves to constitutional court orders is because we think that the constitutional court is acting fairly and within the law. So once a politician or any other prominent person, even a business person, once they criticize the judiciary unfairly, then it damages the reputation of the judiciary as an institution, and it makes it even harder for the next person to comply with the orders of the court. But drilling down to individual judges, I think we are fortunate in this country to have judges who the overwhelming majority have integrity. They take their oath of office very seriously. And so despite the criticism, they will still act independently. We heard from Justice Gampepe last week when she was reading the judgment. The very first line is that the judiciary must act impervious to public criticism or to public rhetoric. So it must, the judiciary closes its ears to unfair criticism. And that's how it should be. And fortunately, most of our judges behave in that way.
You speak of individual judges, so let's take that one a little further. Former President Zuma, during those media briefings on Sunday, the one later in the day, the former president alleged that the panel that sentenced him in this constitutional court judgment included Justice Daya Pillay, formerly with the Pietermaritzburg High Court. And he went on to say that her presence actually contaminated the proceedings, as Pillay had proven to be his adversary rather than an officer of the law. So what do you make of that? How should that be seen and read?
That is sad. In fact, I think Judge Pillay, more than most judges, has come in for a lot of unfair criticism. She has been called all kinds of names by politicians, not only President Zuma, but other prominent politicians. We can recall her interview, which descended into a very undignified spectacle. So I think the criticism is unfair because President Zuma doesn't pinpoint exactly what Justice Pillay did as part of a panel of 9 judges. He doesn't pinpoint her exact actions, which single her out for criticism above all other judges. In the judgment that came out last week, it was written by Justice Gampepe, and there were about 5-6 other judges who agreed in that judgment. They are not named, they are not criticized, but Justice Pillay is isolated as being the one who is an adversary of President Zuma in some way, or who has an outsized influence on the other judges. That is not fair at all. It is, in fact, we should all condemn those kinds of attacks, and we should all condemn any attempt to try and isolate Justice Pillay from the other justices of the Constitutional Court.
So you have the attacks on the judiciary from actors outside of the judicial system, but how difficult is it for those within the system, for judges, as an example, to separate their own personal emotions when it comes to these high-profile cases, especially when there is history where they have had run-ins, for example, with some of the protagonists over whom they now have to preside and pass judgment?
Well, Sakina, I think we must be very careful to describe what those run-ins are, because judges preside over cases day in, day out. The fact that you had a judge preside in your case and they found against you, they found in for the other side, and you lost the case, does not mean that judge somehow has a vendetta against you. It doesn't, and it shouldn't mean that. But of course, judges are not robots. Judges are human beings. They have their own views. They have their own feelings on things. But what we expect of judges to do, at the very least, is that they must follow the law, and they must give us reasons why they decided a case in a particular way. And that is a requirement for judges across the board. We expect them to give reasoned judgments, and then we can criticize them based on the reasons. We can say that, look, I do not think that they read the law correctly in this point, or I think that they should have made a decision in a different way. So I think that's one thing that we must hold them accountable for. And criticism is part of holding the judges and the judiciary accountable. But it must be fair criticism, it must be reasoned criticism, and it mustn't go to trying to isolate judges and say that, look, because a judge found against me in a particular case at a particular time, then that judge has a vendetta against me. That is not a reasonable way to look at things.
One of the other questions at the moment, given what is playing out with the former president, is the question of the application for the rescission of the judgment that was handed down to the former president. Now, I've seen many people asking the question about the now acting Chief Justice, Raymond Zondo, and whether he will form part of the Constitutional Court panel, given that he is also the chairperson of the commission that actually referred the matter in question to the Constitutional Court. So can you speak to us about that and whether he will be a part of that panel or will recuse himself, as some say there may be a conflict of interest inherent there?
I don't think that Justice Zondo will sit in this case. Number one is because Justice Zondo has not sat in a case in the Constitutional Court since 2019. So that's just one. He won't be sitting in the Constitutional Court. So as acting Chief Justice, he has a number of responsibilities, one of which is to run the disciplinary process for judges. He chairs the Judicial Service Commission. So he'll take care of some of those other responsibilities. But as for sitting in the Constitutional Court, that is not something that he will do in the near future. I think the demands of the Constitutional Court versus the State Capture Commission make it not possible for him to do that. But secondly, you're quite right to say Justice Zondo is one of the parties in this particular case. President Zuma cited him as one of the respondents, and so that automatically disqualifies him because you can't be a judge in your own cause. There's a Latin phrase, I think, nemo iudice in sua causa. You can't judge your own case. And so I don't think that he will sit in this particular case.
Just to that point, this is, of course, what the former president alleges that the Deputy Chief Justice or the chairperson of the commission into allegations of state capture has done. Because when he, through his legal team, applied for the chairperson to recuse himself, he contends that by not doing so and by essentially presiding over that matter himself, that's exactly what happened. So let's talk to that in terms of what is being alleged and the merits of it.
Sakina, this is yet again one such claim where we should look at it carefully. We should scrutinize it and look at the facts and not exaggerate it based on emotions or based on the personalities involved. What President Zuma said was that Justice Zondo has some sort of a vendetta against him and is biased towards him because of a pre-existing relationship that they have. Somehow they have familial relations. And so he asked that Judge Zondo recuse himself from the commission. But we must look at the timeline of when he asked for that recusal. So in 2018, it was President Zuma who appointed Justice Zondo to preside over the State Capture Commission. In 2019, President Zuma went to the State Capture Commission, sat before Justice Zondo, listened to his questions. he was given an opportunity to answer. At no point in time did President Zuma raise an issue with Justice Zondo. At no point in time did President Zuma say that because of a pre-existing relationship that he and Justice Zondo have, that he is disqualified from hearing the case, or the presiding over the commission, and he should recuse himself. So we should look at those facts because they are important, and they describe, they tell us how we should weigh this claim that President Zuma is now making. Because as soon as the shoe started to pinch, that's when he started to say, look, this person is biased against me. This person we have a pre-existing relationship. And recusal applications, by their very nature, are decided by the presiding officer that you want to recuse himself. And I think Justice Zondo gave cogent and strong reasons why he should not recuse himself. And I think he was correct.
Well, we have to leave it there in the interest of time, but thank you so much. That was Mbekezeli Benjamin, researcher and advocacy officer at Judges Matter, talking to us about the growing public attacks directed at some of the country's judges. And of course, your views always welcome at Morning Live SABC. Well, just a quick look at